The idle air control on these cars really gets a bad rap. I kind of feel bad for it, to be honest with you. I don't know what's going on, guys, but here lately I have been questioned so much about the idle air control. So I think this is a video that we need to do. I'm gonna tailor it around the idle air control, not so much like, you know, the whole base idle reset. We're gonna talk about that. But first off, let's talk about the idle air control and what it does. So I am no tech guru. I didn't work for Ford. I don't know all the ins and outs. I don't know all the technical jargon and all that crap, right? But what I want to do is help you get your car back running, and I want you to understand how the idle air control works and what you can do to make your car run right. So like I said before, guys, this little device right here catches so much flack. It seems to be the thing everybody wants to blame whenever you have an issue. It's either that or the TPS right here, one of these two. So first off, we need to understand how the idle air control works and what it does. Well, essentially the idle air control is a bypass, right? It lets air coming in through the intake bypass the throttle blade and go straight into the intake. So your throttle blade sits just like this. There's one hole on the outside of your throttle blade, and there's one hole on the inside of your throttle blade right in here. I'll try to throw some pictures up here to show you guys what I'm talking about. So what happens is this idle air control is able to open back and forth, and as the car needs more air, this idle air control can move back and forth, and it lets air bypass the throttle blade. So let's talk about why that's important. Well, a lot of times when you turn your AC on your car or something like that, it changes the load of the car, right? So it puts your car under a different load, and it really needs to idle up. We need a way so that when the computer senses the load, it can let air bypass around that throttle blade. So when the computer senses that the car is under a load and needs to idle up a little bit, essentially that just opens up a little bit, lets air bypass around your throttle blade right here, and idles the car up. That's how it works. It's super, super simple. So now that we know how it works, let's talk about some of the issues associated with the idle air control. So some of the issues that get blamed on the idle air control are just the idle, right? So if your car is not idling good, whether it's idling too low or it's too high, a lot of times it gets blamed on that. TPS is more likely to be bad than the idle air control a lot of times. So one of the things that I want to mention right off the bat is your car doesn't actually need an idle air control. It's definitely beneficial. In theory, you could just crank the idle screw up on your throttle body and your car never need an idle air control, because if the RPM is high enough, then pretty much any load you put the car under, it's going to be fine. Let's think for a second. Does a carbureted car have idle air control? No. Most race cars, race applications, don't have idle air controls. Why do we need an IAC? Well, for air conditioning, power steering, headlights, windshield wipers, all of this stuff matters. An electrical load on the car can actually pull it down to where it needs to idle up a little bit. Crazy, right? So real quick, like, I want to talk to you guys about how to diagnose whether it's an idle air control issue. What I'm going to do now is unplug the idle air control to show you guys how the car reacts. Look at that. This is how your car should react to you unplugging the idle air control. And as you plug it in, the car basically resets and relearns. So let's talk about this a little more in detail. I have a base idle reset video that I encourage every one of you to go watch. So I'm not going to go through the whole base idle reset process with you guys because I've already done that video. So click on this if you guys want to see the base idle reset video. I will touch on it for you so that you understand what it is. So let's talk about some of the issues that people have been mentioning lately. What do we do if we unplug this and the car dies? Is it doing what it's supposed to do? Is that normal? Well, not exactly. And let's talk about why. What you want to do if you're trying to figure out if your idle air control is bad, first off, is unplug the idle air control and then come over here and adjust your throttle screw. So your throttle step back here. You adjust that with the idle air control unplugged. When you get it to where it will barely idle, meaning probably somewhere around like 600 RPMs, 700, at that point, plug your idle air control back in. Guys, you got to remember that IAC is not there to make your car idle under normal conditions. That's not what it's there for. It's really only there for load. There again, remember, a lot of race cars don't even use idle air control. So let's go ahead and talk about something that we've never really discussed or covered on this channel, but it's something you absolutely can do. Let's say you don't want to run an idle air control. Let's say you're done with it. Things aggravate and you can't make it work right. And you don't have an air conditioner and you don't have power steering. Guess what? You don't even have to run an idle air control. It's not a big deal. You literally can unplug that thing and just adjust your idle the way you want to. Now, will it be perfect? No, because the IAC does do a little more than that. Like I told you before, it's not necessary to idle, but it does kind of help out with the idle a lot of times. You do away with your air conditioning, your power steering and stuff like that, you don't even have to have one. Matter of fact, they make block off plates for them, and also you can buy specific throttle bodies. I think Elderbrock actually makes a throttle body for this car that you can bolt on here. Not even a provision for the idle air control. Now, in order to do all of this that we're talking about, there's a few things you need to check first. This is where you start chasing your tail. This is where things do kind of become a little annoying at times. So this is how this works, and I'm just gonna breeze through this and maybe help you guys understand how all of this kind of ties in together and works. So first off, what you need to do, make sure your timing is set correctly, right? The second thing you need to do is get your car to idle with the throttle stop down here. With this little screw back here in the back, make sure your car will idle on its own with the idle air control unplugged. Once you get your car to idle where it needs to be, then come in and check your TPS. TPS, honestly, I'm not picky with my TPS numbers. Typically, I'm pretty good with somewhere around 0.83 to about 0.98. If you change the position of this throttle blade, as you can see, the throttle blade is tapped into the top of this thing, right? That's what moves this. I'll show you guys, look. Okay, so as you adjust the idle here, you mess up the numbers up here. You need to go back then and adjust your TPS to make sure it's right. Now, it may be within spec for you, but most of the time, once you make these adjustments down here, you're gonna throw your TPS off. So go in, make sure your TPS is good. Once everything is good with your timing, your idle air control, your TPS, you can go ahead and start hooking everything back up and do your base idle reset. In the description, I will put a link to the base idle reset video. Now, in that video, I did not mention when to put the spout back in. This is your spout connector right here. In the video, I did not mention when to put that in. As soon as you get your initial timing set, go ahead and pop that spout plug back in and you're good. But you're probably asking, well, how do I know if my idle air control is bad? Well, after you get your idle the way you want it, you got it set here, the car is barely idling on its own. If you plug the idle air control back in and it doesn't change the tone of the car, there's a chance that it's bad. It doesn't always mean that it is, though. The easiest way to do that is to turn your AC on, turn the steering wheel one way or the other, and if the car dies, typically at that point, you're gonna have a bad IAC. So when you have everything set correctly, you literally can come in here, turn your AC on, and the car not really fluctuate. So that's the good thing about having your idle air control and everything else set properly. So I want to give you guys a quick scenario. So let's say you're out of town, or let's say you're on a trip somewhere, or you're at work for whatever the case may be. You're not home and your idle air control takes a crap on you. What should you expect? Well, your car in theory should still run. As long as you're giving it throttle, it basically bypasses the idle air control. But let's say you're having major issues and your car will not stay running. What you can do, unplug your idle air control and just turn the throttle screw until you can get the car to run on its own. Don't worry about the RPM so much. Basically, you're just gonna bypass your idle air control and you're gonna jack the throttle screw up enough for your car to idle. And look, you might have to run without your air conditioning and a few things like that, but you should be okay. It will get you home. There again, guys, the idle air control does not keep your car from running, meaning if you disconnect it, your car still should fire, it should start, you should get fuel, all of that type stuff. Believe it or not, this is a really hard video to explain the idle air control and what it is that I'm trying to convey to you guys. More or less, it just comes down to the fact that the idle air control gets a bad rap a lot of times, and it's really not always the issue. Remember, you don't even have to have it for your car to run. To run properly, yeah, you really do need it. So anyway, guys, I hope this video helps. I'm gonna go ahead, wrap this one up, and as always, thanks for watching.